We were talking about resilience last time, resilience perspective. And this is what we're trying to build in people. We're trying to build their resilience. But of course, you really can't build resilience in people. All you can do is convince them that they have resilience and try to get them to think about it. That's all you can do. Some people are resilient in like almost every circumstance, and then something happens like a hurricane hits, and all of a sudden they go off the deep end, and now everything is not right as far as they're concerned. Whoops, I'm changing my, whoops, I'm going the wrong way again. This is terrible. Okay, anyway, so that's what, so sometimes people can handle just about everything, but they can't handle that. My wife called me 2 days ago. She said, I had a flat tire. I shredded my tire. I think maybe I damaged my wheel. You know, one of those kind of deals. My wife has a flat tire. She's riding on the rim, and she doesn't know it. Okay, that's my wife. Her brain's someplace else, and so she's destroyed her wheel. You don't think this is funny. So she goes to change the tire, and she can't, it's got a wing nut, and she can't, it's been put on there so tight she can't untighten it because. So finally she calls the police. She calls the police, and they come and they take the wing nut off. But they had to do it with a pair of pliers. They couldn't do it, you know, it was so on there so tight they couldn't do it with their fingers. And my wife, she does everything the right way, okay? So if she has to do something with a certain tool, she doesn't think beyond that tool to use something else, okay? All right, so she would never, you're supposed to use your fingers with this. She would never have thought to use a pair of pliers, ever. She said she was an officer. You always do things the right way, right? That's my wife. She's not very innovative. Sounds like I'm really attacking my wife. Anyway, so she called. She wasn't. She was having a hard time. She was having a hard time that day. The cat's leg blew out. It had an infection, and the infection exploded. I mean, so she's got all this loose skin hanging out on this cat, and all the, sounds like a pretty, I know. So she was supposed to sign people up for to vote. That's where she was going when she had the flat tire. Okay. And then she had to call the cops, and the cat's leg blew off. And she couldn't get the door open to the house. She closed the door, and it was stuck, and she couldn't open the door. So she had to go out the other door.
She was in bed for a couple of days then, huh?
Well, yeah, I've been for a couple of days, and of course she calls me because I could have opened the door. I would have changed the tire without any problem, and I don't know if the cat's leg still would have blown out. But I mean, if I had been there, I could have taken care of everything. So she called me to tell me that I need to be home and not here. Anyway, I'm here, and I'm not there. It's not that I love you guys more than I love her. It's just that this is money, so I'm just here for the bucks. Resilience. So sometimes she shows a lot of resilience. Sometimes she's a tough lady. And other times she just folds up like a house of cards. You know, the cat's leg blows out. What do you do? Well, geez, I've seen all kinds of stuff. Yeah, cat's legs blow out all the time. But she just couldn't handle it. I mean, she'd never seen that much flesh. And she said, you can see his bone. Well, sure you can see his bone. All of his skin's gone. Don't get sick, it's all right, he'll be fine. So she took him to the vet yesterday, and they sewed it all back together. But now they're worried that he can't move his elbow because the skin's so tight. But we'll see what happens. I know. She's going to get her tire fixed today. She shredded that tire. She may have destroyed her wheel, okay? She may have to get a new wheel. She's only got like 14,000 miles on this car, and she's already, I don't know what happened to the tire. Anyway. But she never did get to the Labor Day picnic and sign up people to vote, so. Anyway, so sometimes you're resilient, and sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're resilient in some things and not resilient in others. Resilience is the ability to survive and thrive in the face of overwhelming life challenges. Life challenges, of course, have to do with legs blowing out. Yeah, he had an infection, okay? That's what was happening. Resilience is a dynamic process that is the outcome of positive adaptation in the face of adversity, stress, or risk. We see this a lot if you work in the emergency room, if you're a medical person, and somebody says, we need this stat, you know, how fast can you move? That's what stat means, how fast can you move? It's always not fast enough, it's the way it works. But, so how much stress are you under? Some individuals can't handle it, they just can't handle it. I've seen doctors trained to be emergency room doctors who couldn't handle the stress. And after a couple of weeks, they just folded up like a house of cards, which is always fun to watch. Or nurses can't sometimes, you know, their boyfriend left them, the kids are screaming at home, and mom couldn't come over to babysit, and then they get into the emergency room and they just can't handle it. They've got too much stuff going on. And they just, once again, they fold up like a house of cards. Resilience is not a fixed personality trait or an inborn characteristic. No one is either vulnerable or resistant all the time. Sometimes everything's going great, and then all of a sudden a hurricane hits and your house gets knocked down. And what do you do then? Well, there's no place to go to the bathroom. There's no food. You got no water. What do? You have no clean clothes. You haven't bathed in a couple of weeks. Now, for some people, that's no big deal. They don't bathe for a couple of weeks anyway. But for other individuals, there are select things that really get to them, like where do you go to the bathroom? You think this is a really odd thing to even talk about. But if you're on an astronaut and you're in outer space, where do you go to the bathroom, okay? What do? Hold it for 3 weeks while you're up in space? No. You gotta figure out how to go to the bathroom. This is one of the things that happened when people went overseas, when they went into a combat area. Where do you go to the bathroom? Well, you guys practice. Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, you practice going to the bathroom in odd situations, but going to the bathroom when you're being shot at is not the easiest thing in the world. You have to stay down. You don't want to stand up. You gotta crawl around. You gotta dig a hole and then just kind of roll into it and, well, anyway. Some people can handle it and some people can't. One of the problems we had in Vietnam was that when people first came into country, they either got diarrhea or they locked up. And if they locked up, of course, you could give them medication for it. If they had diarrhea, you could give them medication. But it didn't work. None of this stuff worked because this is where the problem was. It wasn't in their gut. You could give them all the stuff that you wanted, it still didn't work. They needed to fix it up here before it would fix it down there. I know, going to the bathroom, what an odd thing to even talk about. Resilience is learned behaviors and patterns of adaptations. Resilience depends on the availability of protective factors. Some people, all their family gets killed in a tornado. They're not upset, and then they find out that they can't find their kitten, and they go off the deep end because their cats are more important than people. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Sometimes dogs are more important than people. Sometimes wolves, I don't know. Sometimes sheep are more important than people. Who would have thought? Risk factors are any influencing factors that can bring or predict negative outcomes on the functioning and overall development of the individual. They can include biological influences, individual influences, family influences, community influences. How important is your community to you? I grew up in, I keep telling you my story of where I come from. I grew up in a community, everybody was a Methodist. They were either a German Methodist, an English Methodist, or an American Methodist. Oh my God, who would have thought there were so many damn Methodists in the world? And there are 3 different flavors of them, German, English, and American. Really? Are there that many Methodists? The answer is yes, there's that many Methodists. And all the churches have different names. But then you find out it's all the same damn religion.
What's an example of biological influence?
What are you talking about, risk factors?
Yeah. Like,
No, I'm sorry, I thought I had it on the next slide. Biological influence of risk factors would be if I had hemorrhoids. Now I've got to take care of those hemorrhoids, and this can change the way that I think about things. I've got a heart condition. This can change the way that I think about things.
Like a genetic disorder?
Well, neither of those are really genetic. I mean,
But
I
would
just,
that count as biological as well?
yeah, genetic disorder would. Yeah, so anything that you think about, any biological aspect of you that you think about, that will make you less resilient or more resilient. You know, if I have to keep worrying about my heart, do I go out and run? You know, I'm afraid I'm gonna keel over and die on the trail. Maybe I won't do that. Hemorrhoids, if I've got hemorrhoids, they're leaking and I can't sit down. I got wet spots on my butt. You know, that's not me. So I gotta think about these things. You know. Or, let's see, can I talk about this? Sure. Women sometimes, when they laugh, they leak. Okay. They urinate a little bit. It happens more with women because they have a different type of sphincter than males do. Males have the male urinary structure is completely different than the female urinary structure. And because of that, females leak sometimes when they laugh, or when something else happens. Yeah, exactly, okay. After they have a baby, sometimes, you know, it weakens the sphincter. Okay. So you'd have to think about that. You have to wear pads and all that other stuff. You're not gonna talk about women leaking, are you?
No, going in a total different direction, if that's okay.
Yes,
Just gonna
sir.
bail you out here.
Yeah, thank you. I was hoping somebody would bail me out. Go ahead, bail me out, please.
Would that also apply to things like historical trauma, or not really?
It could refer to historical trauma. This is a little piece of information in the back of your head. Sometimes you think about it, sometimes you don't. You get into a situation that has to do with your tribe. That has to do with what happened in the 19th century. Yeah, it could raise its ugly head at some point. And we don't need to talk about family influences or community influences. Told you I was a rejected individual because I wasn't a Methodist, and everybody else was a Methodist in town, except everybody else wasn't a Methodist in town because we had Catholics, but they went to the Methodist church, as stupid as that sounds. Why would they go to the Methodist church if they were Catholic? Because if you wanted to be popular, you went to the Methodist church. How important is popularity? And it turns out it was really, really important to people. They went to the wrong church just so that they could be seen at the right church. I know. So they could join D. Malay. And then we'll go into the rest of that. The Masons. Protective factors are any factors that can exert either a direct or indirect influence to buffer the negative effects of risk factors. Protective factors include your strengths, your capabilities, your talents, your coping skills, your resources, your assets. Weirdly enough, I have been successful in my life because I run fast. Now, what does that have to do with anything? Nothing. But it made me more popular. They couldn't reject me because I ran fast. And, you know, when you're in a academic situation, not this academic situation, but when you're a student, if you run fast, then you run track. And if you run track and you run fast enough, then you're a track star. And if you're a star, then you can't be rejected. Can you? Football heroes, do you reject those guys? The captain of the football team, does he get rejected? No matter what he did? Well, sometimes he does, but, okay. So you understand. So these are strengths, as weird as it sounds. So speed had something to do with my success in life. As weird as that sounds. Just because I ran fast, I was successful. It's a protective factor. Not only that, but I could get away from people too. Oh, that was nice. Resilient represents a process and the outcome of competent functioning. Resilience as an outcome involves the interplay of risk and protective factors. So the more protective, of course, you can't run away from a tornado. I mean, you're not going to make it. They go really fast. And which direction do you have to run? If a tornado, you guys don't have tornadoes down here. Yes, you do. You had one 30 years ago. I'm sorry. But if you're ever up north in Kansas or Oklahoma or West Texas and you run into a tornado and it's coming at you, what you do is you run at 90-degree angles from the tornado because it's coming this way. If you run away from it, it's going to run right over you. So you have to run at 90-degree angles. So you run that way, okay, if you can. Get out of your car. One time I was in Montana and a tornado came down right on top of me. It was weird because I'm driving down the road, I'm in my little tiny Miata, I'm driving down the road to a softball game, and all of a sudden all the garbage in the ditches just went up in the air. It was the weirdest thing in the world. You know, you got buckets and you got pieces of paper, and they're all flying straight up. I mean, it was like a magnet was pulling these things, but it was the wind, of course. And all of a sudden, my car felt like it wasn't rolling on the road anymore. It was kind of, you know, it's a weird feeling. It's a really strange feeling to be pulled up by some strange force, and this was air, of course. But I never left the ground. I never actually left the ground, but it did pull me up and it kind of twisted me sideways. Tornado, I know. It was a car. It pulled my car up. I know. Look at the look on your face.
My brother's in Kansas now.
It's okay. They only hit little bitty places. I mean, they're only like a mile wide. I mean, they're not very wide. And sometimes they hit fields. Sometimes they hit creeks. They don't always hit your house, okay? Or the road. They follow the road. They tend to follow the road. Anyway, don't worry about your brother. Even if he gets hit by a tornado, the probability of something bad happening is fairly remote. What were they talking about the hurricane? The hurricane hit the Bahamas and it stayed there. It sat there on the Bahamas. 16 hours of high winds. The winds were so strong it was like a F4 tornado. That's what it was like. And I've been in F4 tornadoes before. It ain't fun. But I mean, they're gone in like 15 seconds, 17 seconds, 30 seconds, they're gone. But it was 16 hours of sustained winds of category F4 tornado in the Bahamas. So if you look at pictures of what happened to the Bahamas, they're ugly. I mean, every place is just torn to pieces.
You got that swell too, just built
Oh,
up.
that water coming in, yeah, it's bad. Anyway, why are we talking about, oh, we're talking about resilience, of course. Resilience is an out, and, okay, so the whole time I'm being pulled up into this tornado, I'm laughing like a hysterical person. I thought it was the funniest thing in the world, because they called off the damn softball game, and nobody called me. So here I am headed to the softball game. I knew the tornado was there, I knew there was bad weather there. So what am I doing? I'm going to the damn softball game. The softball game is so important to me that I almost got killed because of it, as stupid as that is.
I had to go to formation in a hurricane.
Oh, was that right?
Yeah, that's why I'm laughing.
And they didn't have the formation.
They had the formation.
Okay. Well, then you had to be there, I guess you had a choice, you didn't have a choice. Resilience as an outcome represents the resultant positive function and competence developed when facing adversity, and that's you facing adversity. Sometimes it happens, and sometimes it doesn't. Practitioners using the resilience perspective start with an assessment of the relevant factors and then focus on helping clients build on the resilience that they have developed. What you need to do is you need to focus on the fact that they are resilient. As I told you before, I did research on resilience. I was trying to show a select population that they had resilience. I did the tests. The tests said that they were resilient. They had a problem with suicide, and if I could have convinced them that they were resilient, then potentially they wouldn't have committed suicide. In the case of suicide, all you need to do is make them smile one time. All you need to do is make them laugh once, and it breaks that whole cycle of I'm worthless, of worthlessness and hopelessness. All you need to do is change their mind one time, and it just takes one inkling, and you just save that guy's life, that individual's life. And so that's what I was hoping to do with this population. I was hoping to show them how resilient they were and how strong they were. This is a strength. And by doing that, it would have lessened the impact of people feeling hopeless and worthless. Anyway, it didn't work for select reasons that had to do with people not wanting to admit that people were committing suicide. In a Catholics, if they commit suicide, they can't be buried in a hallowed cemetery. In other words, it's not a holy cemetery. They have to be buried someplace else. And it was a Catholic community. So I couldn't get them to admit that all these, gunshot wounds to the head were, they were cleaning their gun, the gun went off. They were playing with a rope and it grabbed them by the neck and they hung themselves. Stupid stuff like that. Practitioners focus on helping clients. It helps them develop a positive outlook on life and self-confidence. You need to accentuate the positive and don't even talk about the negative. That's what you need to do. So they need to do it. It's not you telling them, it's them telling you about their strengths. Maintain, promote, and enhance protective factors. You're smart and you can think these things through. This is a protective factor. So you're trying to accentuate all the positive things you possibly can. Recall successful events in their lives. You've been through this before and every time you've come through fairly well. This is a negative situation, but you've done this before, you've been through this before, and you're going to get through it again. You've been successful in the past, you're going to be successful in the future. Identify resources, their strengths, whatever it is about them that is positive. View a mistake as a window of learning. My wife is short and squat, okay? She's not very tall. And she's husky. When she joined the military people, the military wants you to be tall and slender. That's what they want you to be. They want you to look like Vikings. That's what they want. They want you to be tall and slender. Not too slender. You have to have some meat on your bones, but they want you to be tall and slender. Well, she's short and squat. So in order for her to be in the military, she had to go on a diet. She was on a diet continually throughout her military career. The problem with that was that if she faltered in her diet, she would just go off the diet completely. I know, which always pissed me off. just because you drop the ball one time doesn't mean you have to come out of the game, right? Just because you fumbled one time doesn't mean that you should stop, but she always did. Was looking for an excuse not to be on a diet anymore. Diets aren't any fun at all, if any of you have ever been on a diet, so I
I'm on a
guess
Pringle diet.
you're on a Pringle diet right now.
Coke and Pringles.
Well, that's the hard stuff too. You got sugar in that Coke. You were right.
Oh, I was just thinking, I was gonna ask, so to utilize resilience with a patient, you have to get them to refocus their perspective away from negative.
And onto the positive.
To the positive. From their negative to their positives.
Yeah, and they're the ones that need to state what their positives are. If you can't do that, then you can go ahead and tell them where their strengths are. A lot of people will be focusing on the negative.
Dwelling.
They dwell, they have those recurrent thoughts. This is a problem we have with people with PTSD. We can't get them off that record, that skipping record that deals with all the negative things. What you need to do is you need to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative as much as possible. That's an old song. That's neither here nor there. We need to focus on the present and the future, not on the past. This is a problem that a lot of people have. They focus on the past. This is what happened to me in the past. I used to be fat. Now all of a sudden I can't think of myself other than fat. That's what they're focusing on. But we need to focus on the here and now and what's going to happen in the future. Just because you made a mistake in the past doesn't mean that past mistake needs to flavor the whole rest of your life. It shouldn't, because you can get beyond that. Sometimes you make a mistake. I married the wrong person twice. But then I didn't stop trying to find somebody, the right person. I got married a third time, and the third time was lucky.
The charm.
Well, I don't know how charmed it was. The way she talked to me like the Colonel last night, so I'm not exactly sure. Now, I called her over the weekend, and she sounded like, a wife. Well, I called her last night, she was the Colonel. Of course, her cat's leg blew out. She had a flat tire. She had all this shit that happened to her. Anyway, my poor wife. And she's married to me. And she tried to convince me that I needed to come home. But it's not gonna happen. Yeah, I'm gonna drop all 8 of my classes and go home right now because she had a flat tire.
Where does she live?
Iowa?
Oh,
It's only 1,500 miles away.
only.
Right, only 1,500 miles away. I know, no big deal. My wife was stationed in Indiana, and I was raising the kids in Nebraska. And so from every once in a while, for the weekend, we'd get together, okay. She would drive all the way across Illinois to Iowa, and I would drive all the way across Iowa to the Mississippi River. So we would meet in Davenport, Iowa, and have a good time for the weekend. But now, if we try to do that, it's 1,500 miles, so it's going to take a whole day for me to drive to Oklahoma City, and then she'll drive down from Iowa to Oklahoma City. It's about 700-800 miles. What do you think? I'm ready.
I think you should be resilient.
I'll leave tomorrow. I can make that in probably a day, so it's only gonna take me a day to get back, but it's worth it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Shit, I haven't seen her in 3 weeks. It's time. The trick is getting her to drive down. She just had that flat tire. We'll see what happens. I don't know. That weekend I will not grade, okay? I won't be grading any of your stuff.
Just give us 100s.
Yep. Just give us all A's.
No, that's not gonna happen. Empowerment describes the process by which individuals, groups, and/or communities take control of their circumstances to achieve their goals. That's empowerment. Empowerment has an internal as well as an external component. Sometimes we do not feel empowered, and this is what we need to give these individuals. We need to tell them, you have the power to do this. Some people have been told all their lives that they're dumb, they're stupid, they're ugly, they're fat, they're too skinny, they're too short, they're whatever. They're not smart enough, they're not good enough to make it. And what we need to do as counselors is to empower them to solve their own problems. The reality is they have to solve their problems. We can't solve their problems for them. We can't mother them. We can't be the ones that every time they have a problem, they call us on the telephone and we tell them how to solve it. That's what my wife did last night. How am I going to solve her problem? I can't open the door. She's not strong enough to open the door. It's stuck. If I were there, I'd just yank it open. Or break it. I'd probably break it. But she can't. She's not strong enough. She's an officer, and officers don't do physical things. I don't know what that's all about. But anyway. So we need to empower them. We need to convince them that they can fix the problem themselves. The internal component of empowerment is called psychological empowerment, control over motivations, cognitions, and personality. We need to change your motivation. We need to change the way you think about things. We need to give you the power to do this on your own. And we can, if we can convince you to do it. But if you've been told since you were 3 years old, when you started remembering what people were saying, that you're too short, you're too ugly, you're too slow, you can't, whatever it is that people are telling you, that you're not smart enough, then we have to convince you, we have to give you the power to think on your own. And that's not the easiest thing in the world. To tell you that your grandfather was wrong. Can I tell a story about Marius? Marius won't wear shorts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I already told you Marius won't wear shorts. He thinks he's got chicken legs. All Navajos have chicken legs. He's a skinny little calf.
Really? Just
Chicken legs. He does, he has chicken legs. No. Anyway, so somebody called him chicken legs once upon a time, and now he won't wear shorts. His legs look as good as anybody's. I mean, they don't look that much different than anybody else's. But somebody convinced him that he has chicken legs, and now he won't wear shorts. As stupid as that sounds. So what we have to do, what I have to do, is I have to convince him that his legs look just as good as anybody else's. Or not to care. What should he care what people think about his legs? How important are your legs? And how they look? I don't know, evidently.
Why are you picking on me?
Because you got chicken legs. Your dad told me to pick on you. I saw it yesterday. Anyway, so we have to change the way that you think. Is that possible? I mean, if it was and it wasn't his dad, it was his uncle called him chicken legs, and that's why he won't wear shorts. As stupid as that sounds. How important is your uncle to you? I mean, he's dead now, so what do you care what your uncle thinks, right? If he called you pudgy, why should that affect you today? That was 35 years ago. Why in the world is this still important?
Is it different if it's continuous though?
It's a thought that keeps repeating itself in your mind. It's a broken record that just won't stop in your mind.
I gotta move.
Okay. So we need to empower you to change your own mind and change the way that you think. And that's possible. We can do that. We need to do that with our clients. If they're doing something stupid. I had this lady, oh golly, how can I explain this? She was very attractive, and she married a bum. She married the biggest slime ball that you can possibly imagine. And he would prostitute her. He would invite his friends over to have sex with her. As stupid as that sounds. He got arrested for dealing drugs. And she came in with him. He was about to go to prison. He was out on bail or something. Anyway, he was about to go to prison. And he brought her in because he had molested somebody. And I was doing consultant work with somebody, with a friend of mine in Ohio. And he came in and he brought his wife with him. And his wife, of course, was drop dead gorgeous, and he was this slimy, squirrely guy that actually prostituted her. So what in the world was she doing with him? Why in the world was she with this guy that was not just ugly, but he was ugly in spirit, he was ugly in his physical aspect, and he did horrible things to her. Why in the world would she stay with him? It was because she had been told that she was not worthy, she was worthless when she was a child. And so she felt worthless. She was a very attractive woman. She was a very intelligent woman, but she'd been told that she was stupid, that she had no right to her own thoughts. So he came in, and we saw her, and he said, "Will you take care of her while I'm in prison?" And the guy said, that was my colleague, said, "Yeah, I'll see what I can do." Well, the way that she got along with people was she seduced them. She was very seductive. And this was a power that she had. This is the only power that she felt like she had. She came in one day, and he was trying to counsel her, and she tried to seduce him. And of course, at that point, he realized he couldn't handle her. And so he called his wife in, who was also part of the organization. So he called his wife in, and once the wife started talking to her, it turned out she had no female friends. She was so pretty that nobody wanted to have anything to do with her. No female wanted to have anything to do with her because they were afraid that she would steal their boyfriends or husbands or whatever. So she had no friends. She had no female friends. She only had male friends. And of course, what were those male friends thinking about? They were all drunks and friends of her husbands. So they were only after one thing. So she had to convince her, she needed to empower her that she was not only intelligent, but she was also worthy, that she was not worthless. She shouldn't sell herself so short. And this was a relatively short, it took a relatively short period of time because she had these ideas that maybe she wasn't as worthless as her husband told her she was. And of course her husband was utilizing this negative idea to control her. So they changed her cognitions. I didn't have anything to do with it. But he was right, she was really pretty. She was really, really attractive. But we needed to convince her that we needed to empower her. And we needed to change the way that she thought. We needed to change her motivations. She never graduated from high school because she was too stupid to graduate from high school. We got her GED, she started into college, and she started studying psychology. And she's a counselor now in Ohio. Anyway, we changed everything. She couldn't see. One of the reasons that she had problems in school was because she wouldn't wear glasses. She thought it made her look smart, I don't know. Anyway, we changed her whole personality. Everything changed. She divorced her husband. He spent more years in prison because he had done some negative things to her, and they were able to get him put in prison for a longer period of time. She divorced him eventually, of course. But we changed everything. They changed everything. I didn't have anything to do with it. Internal empowerment involves the belief that the individual will make competent decisions, solve their problems, achieve their goals, and have a significant impact on the environment. Sometimes you try something and it doesn't work, but that doesn't mean you're stupid. You just need to try something else. What was my wife doing? My wife and I don't work very well together because I have my ideas and she has her ideas. And because she is the colonel, we always do her things first, and they never work, and then wonder why. And sometimes my things don't work, so we have to try something else. Then we kind of come together and, okay, anyway. You know, moving something that's too heavy to move, that kind of stuff. I want to muscle everything, and she wants to do it the smart way. She wants to pull it with a car or something. Anyway, we don't work very well together. The external component of empowerment includes the tangible knowledge, competencies, skills, information, opportunities, and resources that allow the person to take action and actively advocate change. And this is what we need to empower them to do. Some people think that they're stuck, and we need to get them unstuck. We need to get them out of that mindset that they have to do what they have been told that they have to do. Who gets to make these decisions? Well, eventually they do. But they're allowing, parents to make decisions. They're allowing friends to make decisions. I need to stop going out and getting drunk every Friday night with my friends. But when it comes Friday night, who do you allow to decide where you're going to go? Your friends. So your friends get you in trouble one more time. Why? Because your friends are, you're allowing your friends to make the decisions as to what's happening in your life. And what we need to do is we need to empower you to change your lifestyle, to change things. Hardest thing in the world to do. If you're dealing with an alcoholic, you're dealing with somebody who is a potential alcoholic, they're not quite there yet, but they go out every Friday night and get drunk and stay drunk every weekend with their buds. So what do you have to do? Well, first of all, you have to convince them that they don't have to do this, and second of all, you have to get them away from their friends, because their friends want to keep them drunk, because they're funny, or they do stupid things when they're drunk. Charlie always farts when he gets drunk, and we all laugh. That's the funniest thing in the world. Charlie can't keep in his gas when he's drunk. Ha 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 ha. So without Charlie there, it's not nearly as much fun. But Charlie needs to make his own decision. He needs to do whatever he needs to do. Empowerment, like resilience, is a process as well as an outcome. New competencies learned from experience leads to new feelings of empowerment. The first time I drew blood, I wasn't very good at it. I went through the vein, bruised the guy all up. This is in the military. Yeah, they think you're doing bayonet practice anyway.
Did you go all the way through the vein?
Oh yeah, I went through the vein. And some people will do that. They'll hit the vein, and they know that they're in the vein, but they'll go all the way through, and then they'll pull back.
Even though they see the flash?
Even though they see the flash, yeah. They'll go through the vein, then they'll come back, and then they know that they're going to get their blood. And that's all they care about. They don't care about your arm. They don't care about bruising your arm. But if you're really good at it, when you stick, you go slow enough so that you're in the middle of the vein when you start drawing the blood. Then you don't bruise the other side. You don't punch a hole on the other side. You only punch one hole. And they're less likely to bruise. If you punch two holes in their vein, that's why you have, yeah, we already talked about that.
My sister is going to school to be a nurse, and they had to practice on each other about how to give shots.
Oh,
She
okay.
said she did it right, but the person who was giving her a shot got scared, stabbed her arm, she freaked out, and she did it again, and
Oh, no.
then she just dropped it. The needle's still in her
Look at
arm.
needle still in her.
Yeah, she just freaked out about it. She stabbed her twice.
I've had nurses do that to me.
What?
Oh, it hurts. Or they'll dig around, they'll fish for a vein or something. Yeah, fishing.
Yeah.
I never fish. I don't have to. But the first time I did it, I wasn't very good at it. So I needed to develop confidence in what I was doing. Is that what I'm talking about? Yeah, so as the first time that you're successful, you realize, geez, if I could remember how I did that, maybe I could do it the same way the next time. And it gives you, experience gives you confidence, and confidence gives you empowerment. Research shows that the more involved an individual, the stronger the feeling of empowerment. And of course, this was very important because I was doing this 8 hours a day. Well, sometimes 12 and 14 and 24 and 36 hours a day. As painful as that was. And I needed to hit the vein every time. The less time it took me, the more likely that I was going to get some downtime later on. I mean, the more time it takes. Some people's theory is that if I only draw 5 people, and it takes me a long time to do those 5 people, then I don't have to draw any more people. My theory always was, if I can do it rapidly enough, then eventually I'll get some time down, get some downtime. That was my theory. It wasn't true. The better you are, the more people you have to draw. That's the way it goes, damn it. And those lazy pieces of whatever we want to call them, negative things, they were the ones that were sticking people and missing so that they wouldn't have to stick so many people.
But it causes you to get better, because then they want you to do all the people who are dehydrated or small
Sure.
veins.
Well, that's okay. Eventually I got to the point where I drew a dead person one time. You know?
Oh, it's okay if I miss that.
Yeah, well, not in this case, because she kept dying and coming back to life and dying and coming back to life. But she was dead, and I was drawing blood gases from her. And I got the blood gases when she was dead, and the doctors went, she's dead, she doesn't have any blood pressure, how are you getting that blood? You know, what's one of those kind of deals. And then she came back, eventually she lived, don't worry about it. We saved her life. It didn't have anything to do with me, but they saved her life. But I drew her blood when she was dead. And the doctors were all laughing. Or they were amazed. Not that they gave me any extra money. Did I get a tip or anything? Hell no, of course not. The empowerment perspective allows clients to develop a sense of power and competency as they experience using their skills and knowledge in new and challenging ways. I'm talking about drawing blood, of course. We're talking about an individual that is dealing with their problems, and the more successful they are at dealing with their problems, the more empowered they're going to feel. And that's what we need to do. We need to make them feel confident in the fact that they're making the right decision. No matter what that decision is. Sometimes just making a decision is empowerment because they've made a decision on their own. You've probably seen people that will not do anything on their own. They let somebody else make all their decisions for them. I can't decide what restaurant to go to ever. Okay. So I never get to make that decision. It's always somebody else, which is okay. I usually can find food that's palatable.
If we ask you right now, where would you want to go? Where would you go?
Yeah, I mean, Saley, let me think. Is this, where am I? Where am I? Am I in Gallup? Am I in Albuquerque? I don't eat in
Albuquerque.
I get sick every time I go to Albuquerque.
Farmington?
There's something about the food in Albuquerque. I
You're going to
can't
the wrong
eat.
places.
I'm sorry?
You're going to the wrong places.
It's a possibility. I wish somebody'd tell me where the right places are.
Hooters.
Longhorns.
Longhorns?
Very good.
Longhorn's usually good no matter where it is. Of course, it's a national chain. I don't even know where that is. Always go to the base. I'm just going to the base. I only go to Albuquerque.
You eat at
Flea market.
PX.
I'm sorry?
You eat at PX.
What?
No, my God, no, that's the
Or the
worst.
BX, I guess.
BX, it's a BX over there. That's an Air Force base. Is there a good place to eat in Gallup?
Flea market.
The flea market?
That was fast.
Is that, sounds like
Avalon.
Mutton sandwich?
Virgie's.
mutton
Earl's.
sandwich is what I need, a mutton
Earl's.
sandwich.
Jerry's. Gordo's.
Gordo's
Yeah.
in Gallup?
Oh, Gordo's is good, yeah.
Yeah.
Where is that?
It's by the Ford dealership.
Yeah, Gordo's.
I don't know where that is.
Seafood night at Fire
I know where Walmart is. And I know where a lot of burger is.
Gennaro's is good too.
Jerry's.
Yeah, Jerry's.
I'm not
I
Gallup.
don't know, I was there last week and I ate a hamburger, a lot of burger, and I got sick, so.
Quick trip to Gallup after the class.
You made me go to Gallup.
The bun was stale and the meat was overcooked. I mean, it was like this thick.
It was Aaron's fault.
Smokies?
It was charred, it was like a piece of jerky, yeah. But there was a lot of lettuce and tomatoes and onions, mustard, and the bun was stale. I mean, it was, and it was two tops. They had two tops.
That's why you just cook at home.
I do, that's where I eat. So, that's a problem. But I never make my decision. If I'm in Iowa, I let my grandson decide, or I let my wife decide. I never decide.
Ooh.
And I'm nice. Well, I'll find
Ponte
some-
Alejandro is a good place.
Where?
Ponte Alejandro.
Where is that?
It's over by Earl's, a little, it's across the street from Earl's. It's a good Mexican restaurant.
I never drive around.
You need to do.
I just stay on that
We'll
one
make you a map.
road. And eat at Walmart.
We'll make you a map.
Places to eat.
Places to eat, and we'll circle
I
all
wouldn't,
of
I
them.
don't eat it.
There's a good place that has steak and enchiladas. I don't know, it's like a bar, it's like right across
We want to
from,
review.
some grocery
We want a
store.
review of all of them.
Like downtown.
Oh, I never do
I
that.
think that's what it is. I like that place.
I try to get in and out as quickly as I possibly can.
You're missing out, that's why you don't eat and we're good.
Probably true. The empowerment perspective helps people discover their strengths, identify their goals, and develop a plan to reach their goals, allowing clients to accept responsibility for change and experience a greater sense of empowerment. There's a philosophy called existentialism. In existentialism, you are responsible for yourself. People don't like this. This is one of the reasons why they love religions, because religion takes responsibility for you, and they tell you what to do. But existentialism is a philosophy that teaches you that you're responsible for yourself. And of course, this is kind of the same situation. We need to take away, take away somebody else making decisions for them and force these individuals into making their own decisions. Some religions don't like that. They want the religion to dictate to you what happens next. Yes, sir.
You're talking about, this is also reflected in Navajo culture. There's two philosophies, Ahojitego and Sihasin. Sihasin is like self-reassurance, self-confidence, and Ahojitego is to be self-reliant. So it's it's interesting you're talking about that. That's what Navajo is used to be resilient.
I like that. I like resilience. I think resilience is important. And I adhere to a existential mindset. I try to take responsibility for everything I do, even though I blame my wife for everything. If I make a mistake, then I admit it. Usually I admit it. I mean, you guys never make a mistake or if I make a mistake on any of the tests or whatnot, I will admit it. I mean, a lot of professors won't do that, but I do. I make mistakes all the time. I may have made a mistake on that one question, so you need to email me and tell me what the question is so that I can reread it. Is the one with the negative 70 millivolts? That's the correct answer. If I didn't put that down, then it's a typographical error. I didn't put it down. I didn't put in the right answer. You guys will be happy to know that I'm going through all the quizzes right now, so this is a good thing for one thing. I'm going through all the questions to make sure all the answers are correct, but the bad thing is I may make a mistake and not put in the right answer. Okay, because I'll go to sleep while I'm typing, and then when I wake up, I've answered like 3 questions, so I'm not exactly sure if I put in the right answers, because my brain hasn't been engaged this whole time. So I may make mistakes.
The quizzes are on Blackboard?
Yes.
Okay, fine. When does it do?
Whenever you finish. How about that?
Do it right now, believe me.
We're on chapter 2. So if you go to chapter 3, we haven't even covered it yet. The dual perspective views an individual as interacting and adapting to 2 surrounding systems or environments. The nurturing environment is composed of family, friends, and close associates at school or work. The sustaining environment consists of people encountered in the wider community and the broader society. This is very obvious in your situation, because you've got close family, people that you call brothers and sisters, brother cousins and sister cousins, okay. So you have an extended family, and this is very real as far as you're concerned, but at the same time, you have these broad traditions, and you have the general society. So it would be like being in this class is your family, but Dene College would be the sustaining environment. Okay? How about that? But everybody has the same thing. Some individuals, of course, they don't interact with the environment very much, so they have a nurturing environment, but they don't function in the sustaining environment. They do go to the store, they do buy things, but it's not much of a sustaining environment. Other individuals, they interact a lot with other people, people that have a job, of course, so their sustaining environment would be their job and all the people that they interact with at work, even though they're not friends of theirs. Yes, sir.
This is a Navajo philosophy too. Sa'analei B'Karajon, it means, basically means being balanced and flexible.
So you have the people that you're closest to, and then you have all those other people that you're dealing with. Yuri Bronfenbrenner has a very similar system. It's called the ecological psychological system. While most European Americans experience nurturing and sustaining environments as fitting together, other ethnic and racial groups experience a poor fit between them. In other words, you do live in the dominant society. You don't have much of a choice. So the nurturing environment, of course, that's your family. If you're white, then the sustaining environment is very positive toward you. And of course, that was one of the questions I asked, the first discussion question I asked had to do with what is white privilege and how does it manifest itself? Well, since I'm white, if I get stopped by the police, they look at me and they see that I'm white, and probably they don't give me a ticket. But if I were native or if I were black, well, if I were black, they might shoot me, but if I were native, they would probably give me a ticket. Or if I were Hispanic, they would give me a ticket. And that has to do with the sustaining environment. So there's conflict. Unfortunately, if you're a minority, there's conflict between you and the sustaining environment. It isn't very sustaining, and in some places it's not very sustaining at all. You live in Arizona. There used to be a law in Arizona that they could stop anybody to find out if they were an illegal immigrant or not. This law has gone off the books. The Supreme Court said they couldn't do it anymore, but it's still going on all over the state. So if you look non-white, then potentially you're going to get stopped.
Is that SB 1020? Was that SB 1020?
I don't know. You guys are the ones that wrote the damn law. And it was Judge Arpaio that was
Oh yeah, it was.
trying to enforce this down in Phoenix. Yeah, so there's a poor fit as far as the sustaining environment is concerned. So anybody that is a minority, whether they're black, Hispanic, or Native, or even Asian, there's a poor fit between them and their sustaining environment. Now, this is very difficult to understand. White privilege is one of those things that white people don't want to admit exists. They want to think that whatever they experience, you experience. As a matter of fact, it's difficult for them to understand that you're experiencing something negative. That's why it took such a long time, all those dead black youths, male youths, it took so many of them to die before anybody even acknowledged that Black Lives Matter is a real thing, or needs to be a real thing. And there's still people in the United States that think everything is the same for everybody. But it's not. And it never is, no matter what. Whether you're white or not, if you're pretty and you're tall and you're good looking and you're athletic, then you get away with stuff. I almost said shit. You do, you get away with stuff. And those of you who have gotten away with things and haven't acknowledged it for one reason or another, you need to think about this. somebody that looks different than you doesn't get away with the same things that you do. In the black community, the darker you are, the less stuff you can get away with. I almost said it again. It has to do with how dark you are. So the lighter skinned you are, the lighter complexioned you are, the more stuff you can get away with. And the more white people think that you're attractive. I know. It has been the same way in a select native community, the Cherokee, back in the 19th century, the end of the 19th century. They used selective breeding. The females that were lighter complexioned were more likely to be able to get married and have lots of children than the darker complexioned individuals. And that's one of the reasons why, if you know anybody that's Cherokee, that's why they're so light complexioned, because it had to do with selective breeding. The reality is that if you go over to Asia, you go to Japan, the Japanese women cover themselves completely. They don't want to get any sun. They wear gloves in the hottest weather. They wear long sleeve shirts. They wear hats that cover their entire faces. And the reason is because they don't want to be dark. Dark complexioned individuals in Japan are people that work outside, and that's not the most positive thing in the world as far as they're concerned. So light complexion, strangely enough.
I saw that in Thailand too. Yeah. They wanted to, if they had kids, I guess the ideal mate was someone who was white, someone who was light complected, so that your kids would come out lighter than you.
Yep. As strange as that seems, why is being pale such an attractive thing? And then you've got all these crazy white people that are trying to get a suntan. I know. Are they nuts? No, they're not nuts. It's just a totally different environment. Why am I talking about that? Okay, so there's a poor fit. And you have to recognize the fact that it's a poor fit. Does all that make sense? Okay. So some people get away with stuff. And the reason they get away with stuff is because they're pretty, they're white, they're tall, they're whatever. The people that can't get away with stuff are the ugly people, they're the short people, they're the unattractive people. So if you've never gotten away with anything, okay.
Explains it then.
Oh, Lord. Okay. But I ran fast. Like the one thing I got. I ran fast. Individuals on the non-dominant group constantly evaluate disappointments in life to determine whether they are based on one's qualifications or on racism from the dominant culture. And of course, who was I talking to? I talked to two people yesterday that were talking about AIM. I hadn't heard anybody talk about AIM in like years, and all of a sudden, two people in the same day mentioned AIM, the American Indian movement from the 1970s. It had to do with Wounded Knee and whatnot. Anyway, so the question is, are they being mean to you because of something that's something internal, something that has to do with you, or is it racism? And this is always a question with minorities. Am I being treated, did I not get that job because I'm native, or did I not get that job because I'm black, or Hispanic, or whatever? It's difficult to tell if somebody is black because the name is the same. So if you're looking at an application, unless there's something that indicates that you are African American, then they don't know that you're black. You have the same names as everybody else. But if you're Hispanic, it's fairly easy to tell if you're Hispanic because you have a Hispanic name. Natives, of course, are a little bit different. If your name's Begay, we all know that. I've never met a Begay that wasn't Navajo. So. Or a Yazi or a Chi. Or if your name is, Stiff Arm. You know, there's Stiff Arms up north. What's the Crow name?
Not afraid.
Not Afraid. That's it. Not Afraid.
I had a friend who came from Denver, and it was his first time going to school. It was at Fort Lewis. And we just met each other on like the first day of school, you know, mingling, and I became friends with this guy. And then he hadn't met his roommate yet, and he was a Navajo, his roommate. This guy was white, and his name was Mark. And then he was kind of, feminine. And Mark was like, should I be worried? He asked me. I said, why? He goes, because my roommate's last name is B. Gay. Should I be worried? Like, is he really? And I was, what are you talking about? And he was like, his last name is B. Gay. Am I supposed to?
together?
And so I said, no. I said, that's just the name, and I had to explain to him,
Right.
the last name. was kind of,
It means son of, I
Yeah.
was told it means son
yeah,
of.
it was just kind of like,
The relative of.
yeah, I
A
had
relative,
to,
okay.
I had to kind of put Mark in place,
There we go. So now Mark
And Mark.
understands.
Yazi is the son of, or it's Yezha.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's Yezha, say Yazi, the son of.
Great.
And we
See,
started with that at my
Marius' name is Begay, and he told me it means son of. He liked him. I'm sorry. You were saying something.
That happened at my school, I guess, back in Pinyon, in Filagana, I guess. So it was her first time, and she was reading off the names of her students, and she got mad, and she hit the desk, and she was, who did this? And here everyone's looking at her, and it said something Begay, and she was, who changed my roster? And in here, everyone's looking at her like, that's my name. It's like, no, it's not, someone changed the name, and she thought somebody actually changed the names on the students' names. She had to go to the principal, and the principal had to explain that to her.
It's sad to be white sometimes. And not understood. But if she had read Hillerman, she would have known that Begay was a common name, as is Yazi and Chi. Okay. Donis up north. All tribes, lots of Donis, and I hadn't figured out where the hell that came from.
There's a Yazi and Begay too in every tribe you go to. Those Navajos have spread out.
Oh. Well, one of my best friends up there was named Begay, David Begay.
We're everywhere.
Yeah, he's back down here, by goodness. Minority members must develop a dual perspective, equating disappointments with the hostility of the broader society. And that's a question that you have to ask yourself. Is this really a racist thing, or did you just not get the job? I used to work at a historically black college and university. Is it possible that, and I was the only white member of the faculty, is it possible that when people see that on my resume, they assume that I'm black? I never thought of that. Until now. So maybe I didn't get some jobs because people thought I was black, because I worked at a historically black college and university. Or maybe they think I'm native because I worked at Fort Belknap, or maybe they think I'm native because I work here.
They think you're a chef because you work here. That's what I always get.
A
Just
chef.
a dining, a culinary school, that's dine. It's a dine
Oh.
college.
Dine College, I never thought of that. Minority members must constantly shift between the home culture and the dominant culture to choose acceptable behaviors in each situation. No matter where you are, if you are from a minority, then sometimes you have to be in the white culture, and sometimes you have to be in the native culture, or the black culture, or the Hispanic culture. In other words, you have to bounce between the two. And this is the dual perspective. You need to understand that people have to do this, that there is a difference between acting the way that you act in one culture as in the other culture. And you can see this in speech patterns, especially in the black community. When black people are talking to other black people, they leave the ends off of words. It's called a patois. It's a dialect that they use. It was kind of interesting. President Obama actually didn't really grow up. For one thing, he grew up partially in Indonesia, but then he also grew up in Hawaii. And Hawaii, of course, there are Hawaiians. There's all kinds of interesting people over there. He didn't grow up in a black community. But when he became president of the United States, sometimes when he was talking to a black audience, Sometimes he would drift into a black patois, despite the fact that he had never really, well, his wife was from Chicago and she is black, so, and I don't know, maybe when he talks to her, he talks in a patois, but he never grew up with a patois. He never grew up with this. That's not the way they do things. There's no black community in Honolulu. There's no black community in Indonesia. He didn't grow up with that. But sometimes he would drift into a black patois, just to be able to get along. Now, the reality is that some black people, when they're in the white community, they speak like a white person. And when they're in the black community, they change the way that they speak. Now, you guys, I assume that sometimes you speak Navajo when you're home, but you don't speak Navajo to me, well, except for Emery, of course. Usually he's explaining something to me. Or OJ, I was in meetings with OJ, geez, I couldn't get him to, I had no idea what he was, and I'm the secretary. I'm supposed to be writing what he's saying, and he's got this 15 minutes of Navajo. 15 minutes of Navajo.
Transcribed it?
He's probably calling me all kinds of sons of bitch. Or whatever, I'm just kidding. OJ's a nice guy. I'm sure he wouldn't say anything negative. Anyway, so sometimes you're in the dominant culture and sometimes you're in your home culture, and it's the same way with everybody.
What do they call it, their phone voice?
Sorry?
Like when you talk in your white voice?
Who, me?
Yeah, because like I was told, I was asked by one of the ladies at the dorms, she was like, where do you live? Where are you from? And I was like, I'm from Sienta. And she's like, are you sure you're not from Farmington? And I was like, why? And she was like, you talk different than everyone here. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you don't have an accent. So I was
A Kayenta accent.
like, I don't hear
Is
any
there a
accent in
Kayenta accent?
anyone.
I don't know.
Do you have a Kayenta accent?
I never noticed.
Okay.
I can tell, you could, like, I've been accused of that before when I was younger. I went to school off the reservation. When I came back, people were telling me my vernacular was a little different. I didn't use as much nasal, because Navajos use a lot more nasals in their language.
Ah, isn't this interesting?
Yeah.
So you were talking white.
That's all, yeah, I guess. It's a funny thing too, when you when you get immersed into Navajo language for a
Sure.
while, and then you come back and you switch back, even your structure, sentence structure is backwards for a while. It takes a minute to adjust, because English is a verb-based language, and Navajo, or English is a noun-based language,
Right.
and Navajo is verb-based. So they're backwards a little bit, and sometimes that's why you hear people speaking in broken English,
Yeah.
is because they're used to structuring their sentences differently. And so there's a lot of little things you can pick up on if you're aware of it. I can tell. It happened to me when I follow my father to ceremonies. For 2 weeks, I'm just in a hogan with nothing but elders speaking Navajo. It takes me a while to get,
To
adjust to being only speaking Navajo.
Wow.
And we come, and then I see it really with my son. He's 8 years old, he'll come in and he's only speaking English at school, then all of a sudden he's quiet the first couple of days till he gets confident and he builds it up, then he's speaking, then by the time we leave the ceremony, he's like, "That's it!" You know, get it out. And he'll even have the inflection in his voice and, you know, and then it switches back from us again, it escapes us and we gotta kind of come back to it, but I'm aware of it now. I can
So
see
you can flip back and forth without.
it takes, I'm not as talented or as good as other people, like some people like my father can go back and forth. He kind of stuck more in Navajo because you can hear
Right.
his language, but I know some people who can speak really eloquently in Navajo and then really eloquently in English back and forth, no problem. Their left and right brains operate really phenomenally.
Are they female?
Yeah. Jocelyn Billy is a really good example of that.
Females have a more flexible brain, as we said before.
Yeah.
And then men, for like men, I noticed it's a little
Hardwired.
Yeah.
Yeah, women don't have a problem flipping back and forth between, their brains are more flexible. The larger corpus callosum. So they don't have the problem that men have. That's fascinating. Okay, so one of the things that we have to recognize is that a lot of people live in a dual environments. They live in the dominant, everybody lives in the dominant environment. You can't help it. Well, I guess you could if you lived in, I don't know, Pinyon. You live here? Oh, it's gone. Oh, my computer must have kicked out. Anyway, so if you live in a dual situation and my computer's dead, the battery's dead. Is it time? 2 minutes, 3 minutes, okay. Okay, so this is one of the things that we have to think about. This is why we talk about the dual perspective, that you need to recognize this, despite, and sometimes it's difficult to tell what environment or what culture people identify with. Some people are from two different cultures. Which one do they identify with? Do they identify more with one culture than the other? Somebody's a full-blooded Navajo, but they've lived in Phoenix all their lives. What culture do they identify most with? Well, probably the white culture, since they lived in Phoenix for an extended length of time. This was a problem with the AIM movement. The AIM movement, people came off the reservation, but most of the people that were energizing the movement were urban Indians who had been relocated in the 50s. That's why Russell Means was from Oakland. He's not from he's a Sioux from Oakland. Exactly. So, I mean, he grew up in the projects in California. So this is something that you need to just determine about your client. What are the two environments that they identify with, and which one is dominant? The dominant one that they identify with. But of course, they have to live in both environments. You can't be black and live in a white environment and not still be black. People will treat you different. I was watching a movie last night where an individual that was highly educated was trying to help with the union movement, and he was killed because he was black. And that's why he was killed, because he was black. And he didn't understand what was going on. He lived in the white environment all of his life, so he didn't understand why they were rejecting him. So I'll see you guys next time. Sorry about the computer dying. My battery died. I know, there's something going on with my battery. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. You don't know what They get you from one place.
They used to carry me like the wind.
Yeah.
Oh, is that right? The fastest guy I ever ran against had no calves at all. None
Easier
whatsoever.
for me
Just
because
black.
of the quizzes.
His legs, from his knee to his ankle,
Yeah, he just finished.
there was no musculature at all.
I
He
did,
was so fast.
and I was still working on it, and I.
Jimmy Epson's the guy's name.
Remember the bottom
Yeah.
of stadium?
Every time I ran
Yeah.
against
Until now I'm gonna finish it.
Oh, okay, so he's able to open it back up in case.
If you need it,
Oh,
yeah.
That is true, huh?
Of course, because you didn't have all the extra weight from all those extra muscles in your legs.
Yeah, like, did you look at Kobe, all the runners,
Short and squat.
their legs were thin too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're the fastest runners for their division, you know.
That's not fair, it's like cheating, isn't it?
My dad got mad at me one time for speaking broken English when I came back from my in-laws' house. My in-laws are the complete opposite of my family. So I said something wrong, and then my dad like kind of corrected it. He was, like, you're speaking like that. I'm like,
You
okay.
get those sometimes.
So I have to speak like a Filipino when I'm at my house, I guess.
Alright.
Okay, we'll see ya.
You know what, Emery told me that